Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We've come to the third session of our webinar. And here I would like to remind you again that we have this 4-day webinar. And here, this event is organized due to the support from BNI, BRI Insurance, and other partners. First of all, my name is Alfriza Hassan. I will be your moderator for this third session. And this is the last session for today, our first day in our webinar, Indonesia Economic Outlook for year 2022. And here we have my partner, Bapak Abdul Aziz. How are you, sir? Stay healthy. Yes, I hope, ladies and gentlemen, you are healthy as well. This is our last session for today, but the issue is very interesting, the revival of the financial sector. And here, to start our event in this third session, we have competent speakers in their field. And we will hear Bapak Wimbo Santoso, the head of Board of Commissioner from OJK. The floor is yours, Pak Wimbo. Assalamualaikum. God's blessings be upon us all. Good afternoon. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya. The honorable panelists in the third session in Indonesia Economic Outlook year 2022. I see my good friend Pak Ahmad Siddiq Barudin. He's the Director of Risk Management from Bank Mandiri. He's a good friend of mine. We studied together in US. And here I also see Pak Agung Prabowo from BNI Sekuritas, Pak Fankar Umran, Managing Director of BRI Insurance, Bapak Edwin Sebayang, and Bapak Edi Tuhirman, the Managing Director of Generali Insurance Indonesia. First of all, let us give praise to Almighty God that due to His grace, we are here in good health to attend this webinar, Indonesia Economic Outlook, with the theme Revival of Financial Sector, organized by BeritaSatu Media Holding. And I would like to also convey my appreciation for the invitation. Ladies and gentlemen, we realize that COVID-19 pandemic has changed all levels of our society. Previously, we took for granted several things, but now it's different. Now, what is important now is for us to survive. And our government, together with various stakeholders, engage in collaboration in synergy to survive during this pandemic. And here, we would like to know what are the steps that we could take together to accelerate the recovery process. Now, of course, there are questions that always stick in our minds, and we want to know more regarding the answers. So what are the steps that could avoid us from bankruptcy, for example? Now, here, we always, from the government side, we update the situation regarding COVID-19 and also what other policies that our government will release. And we will also put a close monitor on the development Ladies and gentlemen, we know that COVID-19 has been with us for more or less 2 years, and it interferes with our mobility and the way we work. And of course, every one of us would like to remain healthy, free from this virus. So, the vaccine distribution is one of the key. And if we cannot achieve herd immunity, I think it is impossible for us to conduct social economic interaction before the pandemic. And when we're trying to do the recovery phase, we must predict several things. I know that several countries already heading towards this direction. They provide various stimulus. Now, we learn from those countries and we want to know the effect from those stimulus. What we don't want is when we're about to recover, certain sectors couldn't support us. So it creates discrepancies, barriers in the supply chain. And of course, this will interfere with our recovery system. And of course, we don't want this. So there are several points that we need to be mindful of. And here, there will be changes in capital inflow and outflow. And then from the multilateral bank, like IMF, they predict our economic growth. And compared to July, where the global economy experienced 5.8% and 4.9% for next year. So this is 0.01 lower. And we realize that we need to be cautious on certain things. For example, regarding the development of new variants of COVID-19 virus. We don't want this new variant to be spreading globally. Of course, we remain optimistic regarding the recovery, but at the same time, we have to be cautious. Now, ladies and gentlemen, November 19, we have 365 cases, and of course, we conduct daily monitoring, and we share all of this information to the public. And we use sophisticated technology to disseminate this information. And for the same period compared to last year, we have 15,000 cases daily. We've come a long way. And this is due to the cooperation from various stakeholders. The game changer, I have no doubt, lies with the vaccination distribution. So here, we want to achieve herd immunity. And once we achieve that, if we catch the virus, because the virus will remain with us, now, what it's up to us is to increase our immunity level. So once we are vaccinated, and if we contracted the virus, then the impact would not be as severe as when we were not vaccinated. So more than 334 million people already vaccinated received the first jab, or more than 45%, and then the second jab already received by more than 88 million people, or 42%. And here we are still trying our very best so that we could achieve 70% target by the end of this year. And our president is trying very hard to engage in synergy between various stakeholders, including the private sector, because we are also working with the banking sector, how we could accelerate the vaccination rate so that we could interact in a safely manner. And we also know that health protocol, we need to uphold them at any time. And when we are traveling to different region, we have to be mindful regarding the infection level, like the ppkm, and the mobility depends heavily on our economic activity. The ppkm level will increase, and once it reaches an increasing level, then our mobility need to be even restricted. Same experience by the business sector, restaurant, hotels, shops, and as we know in the past, it have severe impact on our economy. And as you know, our economic sector rely heavily on household consumption. Now, if I may ask us to have a brief flashback. This is the data that we released in March. Now we have government regulation of Perpu. And this is a preemptive policy, extraordinary policy. And we never thought that we would release such policy. So here we have various policies in the economic sector, but we realized without fiscal stimulus, it would be difficult for us to achieve the target, together with monetary policies as well. So here OGK, together with LPS, we work hard so that our policy could bring about change and assist the people. We, together with the LPS, or Indonesia Deposit Insurance Corporation, we keep a close coordination. We monitor the transportation, public transportation, the local economy. And remember last year, it created a high level of unemployment rate. And we want to reduce the negative impact for the people who cannot make ends meet, cannot provide food on the table. We want to change that situation. We realize there is disruption at all levels. And for people who work so hard to save during this pandemic, they have to use their savings. And here, what is important, we should not ease our behavior. We need to increase the health protocol. And here, also from the government spending side, we want to maintain that. And it is supported by the government. It is more than 3%. And the banking sector have also reduced the interest rate, and it gives some sort of leniency, and it is the liquidity rate. Even though I realize that there are many business sector who cannot meet their installment payment, but we remain optimistic. And here we release several regulation policies. We have 6.3% policy, and the central bank also released supporting regulation, and also the SKB, the joint ministerial decision. So we could ease the liquidation rate so that we could assist the people, the community. And the figures show significant increase in the number of government assistance program in healthcare and in other sector as well. And last year, we also put additional 45 trillion in the banking sector. And then OJK maintained the liquidity rate and the balance sheet of its banking sector. We know that there are a lot of customers who cannot meet their installment payment, and we don't want it to be considered as default. We want to give them ample room, leniency, and when COVID-19 could ease, then we're hoping that they could revive their economic activities. And we also want all levels, including the tourism, economic sector, restaurants, hotels, cafes, food stalls. And we realize that for foreigners, foreign tourists, we're still restricted. And I know that in Bali and certain tourist destinations, they're still relying on domestic tourists. And then we have other efforts to stimulate the economy, not only in the credit sector, but also in the stock market. We made changes, adjustment. And here in the stock market, the emittent could purchase their shares directly. Now, this is a good signal for the people so that they have faith in our economy, and while making efforts to reduce COVID-19 infection. So we've done a lot of things, and we receive ATMR for the housing credit and also vehicle credit. So if they want to have the first house, the down payment is 0. Now this is one of our efforts. And we want to ease the tax for the first year, and this gives huge confidence at the society level, and they're starting to purchase certain homes. So this is a good sign, and there are many infrastructure housing projects are undergo revival. We could see that there is an increasing activity, and we send several indicators that our economy is reviving. In second quarter, we experiencing increase. Previously it was 3.5% year on year, or 1.5% quarter to quarter, like we experienced in the third quarter last year. In July and August of last year, we experienced high mobility restriction, and it interfered with the development rate. We understand that during the third quarter, it relates with the spending power of the people. It's only 1.03%. Oh, this is household consumption. And in second quarter, the household consumption is 53%, and we've seen an increase of 5%. But third quarter, there's only 1.0%. This is because of the high restriction level we're experiencing in the month of July until August. And here, it impacted a lot regarding our economy. And then regarding export-import, we see that there is a significant role, and especially from domestic household. And we do whatever we can to increase export and investment. And usually at the end of the year, the investment level is increasing. So therefore, we hope that at the end of the year, the development growth could reach 4% or even 4.5%. In year 2022, we expect to see increasing growth. There are other figures that we would like to share with you, especially from the financial sector, and this is related with the phenomena we're experiencing in the capital market. And here we have an enormous figure since the beginning of this year, over 12%, and the market capitalization more than 8,000 trillion. And we have also experiencing a foreign investment. And from the composite index that we're witnessing, most of them are from technology, consumer product, and health. This condition is significantly higher compared before COVID. And then at the lowest level, March 24th, 2020, our composite index is at 3,000. If you could return to the previous slide, number 11, we've reached the lowest bottom. Now, why we could achieve a high rate? First, because the people are confident regarding our economic fundamental, because we rely our economy on domestic consumption. So if we open the mobility, then all sectors will increase. And especially those sectors related with technology. So there are startups dominating the stock market. And then this year, we have an increasing investment. We have new emittents as well. And this condition is far above last year's. Previously it was 114 trillion. And next year, I'm certain that the figures would remain high because there is a lot of pipeline, 81 pipeline, and worth 41 trillion. And there are, of course, other startups that are about to enter the stock market. I don't know whether they will enter it at the end of this year or next year. All of this give opportunity for investor retail. So if they cannot consume or they have limited mobility, we see that there is a lot of retail investors that have increased. We see this from October, more than 6 million investors, more than 100% increase. Why? Because they don't have the opportunity to consume directly, but we invite them to invest in a digital platform. That's why we see a significant increase. And 6.8 million investors, they're only in retail investment only. And then we are optimistic in our banking sector. The conditions are relatively stable. We have liquidity level, capital range is quite stable. in line with the credit distribution. And year to date, we have an increase of over 3%. Corporation, same, 34 trillion. Month to month, not year on year. So these magnificent figures, and it shows that the real sector, the consumption rate at that sector have increased and encourage further growth. And then year to date, 3.2%. We predict it will continue until next year, which is more than 4%. Now, this is outstanding. Usually 6 or 7%. This is before COVID period. And then here, the figures are still accommodating with the government regulation. And if we see the data from October, it could reach to over 9%. And previous year was like 7%. Now, all of this increase our optimism level. It shows that our liquidity level is still manageable. And it shows that we have ample room for the banking sector to distribute their credit. And NPL, 3%. This is lower compared to last August. There is a slight increase, apology, but it is still below the threshold. And we are certain that this is due to a previous restriction, PPKM. And then for the non-banking sector, the APF, it is still low threshold, and this is in line with the credit growth because insurance linked directly with credit growth. I also would like to share the figures regarding restructurization during COVID period. Now, the data from October, we have more than 117 million. Previously, it was 700 trillion, and involving over 6 million debitor. And this decrease in line with our attempt so that the banking sector could remain vigilant and all debtors in the restructuring program could have sufficient buffer if they need to fall under NPL category, so that when things back to normal, then we could see whether the restructurization need to be maintained or not. So when it's time for us to go back to normal, we could consider certain aspects. Because the NPL is still within range. And there are also several challenges. And I believe we could take advantage of these challenges. First, digitalization. It is inevitable. We must be able to live side by side with digitalization, and we must use the technology optimally. And not only in the financial sector, but also in other sectors such as health and other sectors. And therefore, OJK stimulate the growth and We also encourage other customers to have digital mindset. But at the same time, we must be mindful of the cyber risks, cyber threats. And we know that there was illegal online lenders that's increasing, and we must be mindful of them. But here, the commercial banking, they don't have to open their physical branch any longer. Some of them already divert into the digital branch. And this is good news. Even though there are certain glitches still occur, but I'm sure that in due course, they will overcome those problems. They could verify the data completely. Now, this is the digital sector, but overall, the people, the state take benefit from this digital transformation, including providing credit or distributing credit to SME. So we want to give the optimum service to the people, even though it is not supported with the physical branch office or staff. And then second challenge, climate-related risk. Now here, almost every day we hear challenges and the process, how we could enter the transition period regarding how to reduce gas emission. Now here, we put it in the sustainable financial roadmap. We are still working on it. And we would like to proceed with the carbon trading so that carbon credit, we could have it in place shortly. And this should be an opportunity for us to improve our performance. And here, we also need to increase the vaccination program, and for us to be able to enter and be ready for another wave of COVID infection. So here, we believe that we could be better prepared for the next outbreak. Ladies and gentlemen, OJK, of course, will always provide the up-to-date information and guidance on what we do, especially concerning challenges we face on the ground. For example, digitalization, we have the roadmap ready for that. And regarding green economy, we also have a roadmap for that particular issue, and how to tackle various issues, the negative impact, and we also support the digital literacy. Apart from that, we still have room for growth. Apart from the technology development, we also support SME because there's still plenty of room for them to develop. Many areas they could cover, and we could optimize many things, including more opportunities to utilize technology. So we could settle or develop clusters, combine it together with the subsidized credit, small credit, and this is our strategy, how we could increase our expansion. And with the digitalization, we don't have to rely on physical bookkeeping or other paperwork, so it could be paperless. And here we also very positive regarding the stock market. We could have instrument like security crowdfunding. This is a digital tools could be used for millennials. And if millennials already have contract with the government, they could build almost anything and the contract would last for 6 months. But of course, we limit the amount. It's like 10 billion. So if they go physically to the bank, they would be declined because they don't have credit record. But so far we have 7 platforms in place and we have distributed more than 300 billion rupiah. Apart from that, we are trying to stimulate the informal sector. We have micro business sector, the Sharia level. Now we want to increase the education level to the people. If they have small business like relating to handicrafts, sewing, knitting, cooking, we want for them to be able to market their product online. And here, this is truly good news. We want to support the literacy education, and we have several teams that could work in all across Indonesia. And then we also cover climate change. We have roadmap as well, working with all stakeholders. And here, we even have the climate risk. There will be risk management on climate guidelines. And here, when we have a roadmap, we always implement it right on track and apply this risk management on climate change. And we will add other elements to make it more comprehensive. At first, we have an intensive debate, but Indonesia support this this program, and we have established task force. And this is FSP's agenda and ASEAN agenda. We have ASEAN taxonomy team as well. And here, I would like to inform you that in general, we have a positive economy. And with all the figures I mentioned earlier, we have high hopes that this is a good momentum for us to continue our effort. So I humbly invite all stakeholders, practitioners to take use of this momentum. And even though we realize that there are risks attached to what we do, especially regarding fiscal, monetary policies. But if we intensify our collaboration, we coordinate better than before, we could overcome the challenges. And we could minimize the impact towards our development. And we experienced the same back in 2013. So we will continue our close monitoring concerning all aspects. And we will also have a discussion in Bali shortly. You could follow this online regarding our agenda, how we could prepare mitigation policies concerning monetary issues and also the impact of inflation. So that is all in general sense. And I'm sure that we could go through this year relatively better, and the same with next year. That is all from my side. Thank you so much for your kind attention. God's blessings be upon us all. Thank you so much, Pak Wimbo Santoso, the head of commissioner from OJK. Now, before we continue, due to time constraint from Pak Wimbo, allow me to invite you to have a brief photo session with all of our participants. So I humbly invite all of you to turn on your Zoom camera. So we will have this virtual photo session.
So thank you again, Mr. Wimbo Santoso, as the chair of OJK Board of Commissioner, for opening this afternoon session. And to usher in our dialogue on the rise of the financial sector. There are a number of considerations that will prove to be a challenge for us going forward, but let's go on with our discussion, which is on the rise of the financial sector. And for question and answer, you are welcome to write your questions in the Q&A section in your Zoom application. So those of you who have questions for the panelists, please write it down in the Q&A section. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Pak Abdul Aziz to moderate our discussion this afternoon. So thank you, Elisa. It's such a relief to listen to Pak Wimbo's explanation, because we have been anxious about our economy next year, but Pak Wimbo had unequivocally said that next year's economy will be better than this year's. He had also spoken about some indicators that are demonstrating how Indonesia is moving toward a positive direction. The NPL is low, 3.22%. Capital ratio is quite high, 25%. There is ample liquidity, and contracted credit is starting to show positive numbers. The stock exchange is showing incredible growth, with over 100% growth in number of investors, 6.8 million. And today, the stock exchange is reaching its highest score, the composite index, 6,700. And I hope that this will form a sound basis for further improvement in the future. So to clarify and to elaborate on what Pak Wimbo Santoso had spoken about, we have with us 5 panelists. The first one is Mr. Ahmad Siddiq Badruddin, Risk Management Director of PT Bank Mandiri Tbk. Good afternoon, Mr. Siddiq. And we also have Mr. Fankar Umran, CEO of PT BRI Insurance. Good afternoon, Mr. Fankar. We also have with us Mr. Edi Tuhirman, CEO of PT Asuransi Jiwa Generali Indonesia. Good afternoon, Pak Edi. We also have Mr. Agung Prabowo, the CEO of BNI Sekuritas. Good afternoon. And lastly, we have Edwin Sebayang, advisor to the Indonesian Securities Analysts Association. Good afternoon, Mr. Edwin. Okay, let's begin. So we're wondering, Pak Wimbo said that there are a number of sectors that will recover earlier than others. Let's go to Pak Sidik first to ask which sectors will recover first to bring the other sectors to grow along with them. So thank you, Pak Abdul Aziz. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, the panelists, Pak Agung Prabowo, Pak Edi Tuhirman, Pak Vankar Umar, and on behalf of Bank Mandiri, I'm going to talk about some of the issues that Pak Aziz had asked earlier. But first of all, a brief update on the credit allocation. So in the left, there is the credit growth trend. The lighter color is in the banking sector, and the bar chart is the credit growth in Bank Mandiri. So from December 2019 until December 2020, the banking sector shows a decrease in total outstanding balance from 5.2%. And starting September 2020 until September 21, there is a growth in credit there's a net of growth of 2.2%. The same it goes with Mandiri, Bank Mandiri. During the peak of the pandemic, Mandiri had an outstanding balance contraction of minus 0.4%, but there has been a net growth of 7.7%. In the right graph showed asset quality, and the green line shows the national trend from December 2019 to December 2020. There is an increase in non-performing loan, but Bank Mandiri had a significant increase from 3.5% to 3.2%, so below industry standard at this point. And as to the insight, at least on Bank Mandiri portfolio, we can see which industry is thriving during the pandemic. So out of the top 10 biggest credit in Mandiri based by sectors, there is the palm oil industry or agriculture makes up 10.7% of the credit portfolio, and it's grown by 13.5% with fairly low level of NPL at 0.69% by September 21. And the rise of palm oil prices had driven this industry to grow quite significantly. So and with the support of government policies as one of the government's focus, as infrastructure for budget for 2021 had been raised by 41 trillion. The government had also issued the latest priority infrastructure plan list, and this had been supported by the banking sector. Others like energy and water had been impacted by the rising demand for energy and water worldwide. And with the increase in the demand for data and internet, And as this sector had grown as well, and with the government support for telecommunication and the telecommunications sector, this sector has also grown. The finance sector, on the other hand, has been impacted by the corporate demand. The next is how Bank Mandiri managed the non-performing loan. On the upper part, we talked about the risk management of existing account. And the second part is how we mitigate the risk of existing NPL, how we recover our loan from existing problematic accounts. On the top part, there are ways in which we manage good accounts by conducting periodic reviews using sophisticated data analytics to get an early warning or identification as to who or which sector will in future be impacted by certain issues or problems, even though they are still paying their installments. So we can identify what sort of early actions to take to prevent these accounts from becoming non-performing loan. So we access various relaxation or moratorium programs using the regulations by OJK. And we also take advantage of the government stimulus program, including interest subsidy and loan guarantee. And we also proactively build up our credit provision on accounts that we restructure with the anticipation that they will become bad credit in the future. So we gradually build up their credit provision. For non-performing loan accounts, we do more aggressive and innovative solutions to recover the loan through restructuring and exit strategy, including the claiming of the insurance or the collateral asset, or coming up with other solutions, for example, finding the investors and conversion, for example, from debt to equity swap temporary on a temporary basis. And for debtors with absolutely no hope of recovery because we have exhausted all possible recovery efforts, we try to recover the assets through other means. We have also come up with strategies for accounts that have been impacted by the pandemic. So debtors that meet the OJK regulations, that performing debtors that had been negatively impacted by the pandemic, we classify them into 3 categories, whether they are low risk, medium risk, or high risk accounts. And depending on their survivability probability, the high risk ones, we set up CKPN that is higher than the OJK, than the one OJK required, so that if we restructure the account, even if they become bad credit, we are prepared with the CKPN. So it will not influence the volatility of Mandiri finance. And Now that NPL is lower than is at 3.9%, 3.4%, and loan at risk is also increasing. This is a portfolio of high risk accounts. These are those with collectabilities 3, 4, or 5, with those with collectability 2, and also those with collectability level 1, but which had been restructured. So we have gradually decreased this to 20%. This is also evident in the cost of credit. The cost of credit was highest in late 2020 at 2.2%, but now it is now in 2.11%. This is a credit probation year to date divided by total credit portfolio. So it reflects how much credit provision can be taken based on the credit quality of the portfolio. On the next page, we talked about how Bank Mandiri prioritize its clients. So we analyze the data with our chief economics team to analyze by industry. And one simple analysis that we did is to observe the trend, the growth trend of the GDP of each industrial sector from the second and third quarter of 2020, and observe its credit growth and NPL performance industry-wide, and then compared it with the GDP. The green ones are those that shows great GDP growth and coupled with greater credit year on year. So these are the top 3 industrial sectors that we need, that we think are resilient, recovered, and needs further encouragement. The light green ones are industries with positive GDP growth. Some of them are already in double-digit growth, but their credit growth is still negative. So this is the biggest opportunities. These sectors that have been improved with positive prospects, but the banking sector are not willing yet to extend them the loan. The pink ones are the sectors that will require more time, that will require more caution, because at the moment they are showing negative GDP growth. And if they grow at all, we still have to be cautious of the various landmines that are. So this is something that we continue to do to evaluate the sectors. We need to identify which sectors is resilient, which ones is growing, and what are their prospects going forward. And based on this analysis, we come up with the following business and economy prospect. In the third quarter, our economy had slowed down, but it will rise in the fourth quarter as COVID-19 is getting under control. In the left chart, you can see that there are 3 leading indicators that we need to continue monitoring, because they can help us to forecast whether the economy will grow in a positive trend or not. The first one is PMI, which is Purchasing Manager Index, and then Consumer Confidence Index, and Spending Index. So these 3 index or 3 parameters from July to October had shown a positive increasing trend. And this shows that in the fourth quarter of 2021 and in 2022, there is a big probability that Indonesian economy is going to grow, because the early indicators are showing that we are going in the right direction. And in terms of the banking sector, starting February and then April of 2021 and up to now, growth of credit on all sectors, SME, corporates, and consumption, all had shown a positive credit percentage. This is driven by consumption. And in 2022, we forecast that the growth, economic growth, will continue to grow to reach the 5% level that we had before the pandemic. What we need to continue monitoring is the risk of inflation, especially as an impact of the inflation in other parts of the world, like the US. They are experiencing high inflation, one of the highest inflation they had experienced in the modern era. And with the normalization of the global economic monetary decisions that might impact the Indonesian economy in 2022. So this is my last slide. Thank you for the opportunity, Pak Aziz. Thank you. So thank you, Pak Ahmad Siddiq Badrodin, Director of Risk Management of PT Bank Mandiri Tbk. So it's very interesting. I think it's amazing that Bank Mandiri can grow from having been contracted to minus 5.2 to positive 7.7% growth. And the amazing, extraordinary credit performance is coupled with a very low non-performing loan. So we can maybe talk about this more during the Q&A, but now I'm going to give the floor to Pak Vankar Umran, the CEO of PT BRI Insurance. Pak Vankar, the floor is yours. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Mr. Wimbo Santoso, Chair of OJK Board of Commissioners. So happy anniversary to OJK for its decade of serving the country. Also, Mr. Ahmad Siddiq Badarudin, Mr. Edi Tuhirman, CEO of Generali, and Mr. Agung Prabowo from BNI Sekuritas, and Pak Edwin Sidbayang, advisor to the Indonesian Securities Analysts Association. And also the host, Mr. Aziz, and greetings. I'm going to talk about this issue for the next 10 to 15 minutes. I hope that we can cover every one of these slides in the allotted time. So this is the title of my presentation this afternoon, which is on the insurance penetration through digital acceleration. As is expected, as is hoped, I am going to share how digital acceleration had helped in better insurance penetration. So let's begin with a comparison between banking credit and the growth of insurance premium. You can see that, as Pak Wimbo said, insurance premium is highly dependent on the banking credit. Data that we have gathered since 2019 had shown a similar trend. So when banking credit grows over 6%, insurance grows over 15%, and as it plunges to 5%, insurance plunges as well. And when recovery starts, then insurance starts recovering as well. This is because insurance always follows the business. And they follow a domino effect, because in Indonesia, most of the member of our public are not insurance minded. So insurance for losses means to insurance their asset or their property. It's because it's part of the financing scheme. So property insurance is related to housing loan. Vehicle insurance is related to vehicle purchase, leasing, or so once they no longer are paying the installment for their vehicle, for example, they stop having car insurance. There is also another important point that I want to share on this forum, which is how to have a different perspective when we're talking about protection. Protecting our business is a way to maintain sustainability, with the end result, with the end goal is that when the business is sustainable, then it will help to sustain the national economy. Business survivability against risk and even when the economy is showing positive trend, there is still risks that businesses have to be prepared for. So far, the pillars of business growth or economic growth are limited to two pillars. The first one is development, and the second, financing. Sometimes we stop on 2 points when there is a third party that should also be reinforced, which is protection. Why? Because when something happened to a growing business, when a risk happened to an unprotected business, there will be problem, especially for those in SME, because they don't have any awareness of the need for insurance. They don't have any reserve capital to recover their assets, and because they lack the insurance literacy. We also talk about businesses have to be protected just as much as the financing. When you apply for a loan and you put a collateral, an asset as collateral, it has to be insured. But a lot of business people who do not apply for loans also did not insure their businesses. Bigger businesses might be aware of the business risks, so they have risk management measures like having capital reserves to mitigate the risk. But smaller businesses, micro businesses or ultra micro businesses, as we have listened this morning to, like Pak Supari said this morning, a lot of micro businesses are not protected. The number of insured small businesses are very small. Many are not aware of the need for insurance. So, for example, when their store is burned or their cart is broken, they don't have enough capital. They do not have the capital. They do not have the cash, the savings to repair their cart or to repair their shop. So protection of the business is just as important as protection of the loan. So when someone, because people still think that once they paid off all their loans, then they no longer need to insure their asset. And then our data show that the contribution of general insurance to the national economy is still very, very low. The data show that it only contributes less than 3% to the PDB, to the GDP. And compared to our neighboring countries, they already have insurance contributing to over 20% of the GDP. So we can say that there is still a huge potentials for the growth of insurance premium, and which will indicate the growth of economic strength in Indonesia if we look at it from a positive viewpoint. We have listened to, as Pak Wimbo has said in his exposition, one of the exposures, one of the challenges that we need to be prepared for is the climate change. There is a risk that climate change will pose a threat to businesses in economic or social issues, and we forget about the environment. While in the global report issued by the WHO, the top 5 risks that threatened humanity includes extreme weather, climate action failure, and infectious disease, which only comes up to the 4th in this list of 5 risks. So it's very important for us to be cautious of these risks. If we look at the data in Indonesia, data from the weather agency, the Weather and Meteorological Agency, in 2021 alone, there had been 2,208 natural disasters happening in Indonesia in 2021 alone, with a flood being the highest number of incidents. And when we're talking about how this relates to businesses, all of these have a huge impact on small businesses because they are at the forefront of these disasters. They might be impacted by the flood, by the typhoons. And as I had said, in addition to strengthening financing insurance, we also need to strengthen business insurance. And let's talk about insurance for everyone. Businesses, especially SMEs, are vulnerable and they need insurance. They contribute 61% to the GDP and absorbs 97% of the workforce, but they don't think that it's important to protect their businesses. Whereas when they are faced with a problem, with a risk, it's difficult for them to recover, especially when they have loans that they have to pay to the bank, when they no longer can operate their business because they ran into a problem, they cannot, their production is halted, for example. So the SME post huge potentials, huge untapped potentials. I'm not going to talk about middle to big corporations because those are covered by good insurance. Logically, they would have to be insured. But let's talk about the SME that contribute a huge amount to the Indonesian economy. Out of the 65.5 million SMEs in Indonesia, only 10% are insured or hold an insurance policy. OJK data showed that insurance inclusion is only at 13%. This is very low compared to inclusivity in the financial sector, which has reached 76%. So this is a huge opportunity for insurance company. And if we can explore this together, if we collaborate on tapping into this potential, it is possible for us to continue growing and contributing to the national economy. Even so, when we're talking about the significant potentials of insurable individuals, we also have to talk about the challenges. It is not easy to reach out to SMEs, to small businesses across the country. So to penetrate this market, we need digitalization. We need massive digitalization. But we also need to remember that insurance is not a one-sided business. We cannot simply live conventional level. A lot of people and businesses who are not comfortable to go digital, so they need more conventional business models to cater to them. So what we have to do is direct to customers sales through applications, but applications only works for example, the urban population or the millennials, and where in the remote regions, even those with who have access to the internet are probably not that familiar with the use of applications. And then business to business or B2B, then we can work with institutions, with channels to SMEs. So we can use API to contact these SME business, and then business to customers. And once the B2B, when D2C is not working yet and B2B isn't enough, so not everyone can be reached through the digital platform. So we use the B2B to do digital outreach, and then we also can hire an agency to reach out to the customers directly. There are almost 2 million bank agents that, and if they can penetrate, if they can reach out to 100 people, then can you imagine just how much growth they can get for the Indonesian insurance and banking sector? So the insurance is a defense for the businesses toward building national economic resilience. So I think that's it from me. Thank you so much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Pak Vankar. Maybe just a little question, just a few questions. We know that insurance, today we know that insurance are usually only used by corporations. But you said that even SMEs can be protected by insurance company. Yes, that's so. So we want to know whether Beri Insurance has tapped into that market, and how many clients have you reached out to using that method? I haven't talked about the middle to big business because they are insured, even when they are not lending anything from the bank. But we haven't touched we haven't tapped into the SME market. So this is something that we need to penetrate together because they make the biggest contribution to the national economy. So we cannot go directly to them because it's difficult to reach out to them across the country. It's difficult, it's impossible. Insurance company, usually there are 6 insurance companies in Indonesia. They don't have hundreds of branches like banks. Some only have 20 branches. So the way we do it is using that B2B model, B2B2C model, or D2C model. So we have apps for the younger generation, and we work together with businesses and businesses that have agents to reach out to the potential clients. So in 2018, there is an increase in 2018, 2019, 20 and until today, we have made about 8 million clients from that particular group. So thank you, Pak Vankar.
And now I would like to invite Bapak Edi Tuhirman, Managing Director of Generali Insurance Indonesia. Now, Pak Edi, when we talk about insurance, usually we always talk about digitalization as well. Now, we know that during the pandemic, the digitalization already go into multiple layers of our daily life. Now, I would like to know how Generali could also utilize digital platform to its customers. And you know that the insurance penetration in Indonesia is still very low. And perhaps this digitalization could increase the penetration. Yes. Thank you. But first of all, I would like to grab and greet warm welcome to Pak Vankar, and thank you for that presentation. I noted down several important points. Here, our penetration is still low, not only in health insurance, life insurance, and this is a challenge for us. So here, from the presentation from Pak Wimbo and Pak Vankar and Pak Siddiq, at the third quarter, if we compare with the third quarter last year, there is a decrease of 3%. And when we talk about new business, there's a decrease as well. But this year, we have recovered, even though not fully. In this third quarter, premium have increased 150 trillion, but we must admit our industry is still very small compared to banking sector. Our asset is still several hundred trillion only. But what's interesting, when we see top line, there's an increase. We see that insurance claim last year, there was a decrease by 6% from 7.7 trillion to 7.3 trillion. So there's a big probability that the people still afraid to go to hospital. But this year has bounced back to 7.8 trillion. So you could say almost normal regarding insurance claim. But what we fear the most is death claims. So last year, 7.7 trillion rupiah on death claim. And year before, there's an increase, but this year, more than 12 trillion. So double before COVID-19 pandemic era. Yes, so it's frightening. almost doubled this year regarding the death claim. But here, our contribution towards the people is enormous. More than 12 trillion rupiah that we paid to the community. And this shows that there are many Indonesian families who are assisted when they claim the death claim, the life insurance. And this is the fact that the data that we receive on the ground. So there are risks associated, yes. But once COVID reached its peak in the month of June, we see that there is a decrease in the number of incoming claim. So what happened to our industry? Now, last year, when COVID-19 started, what did we do? Now, we act quite fast. When we had to work from home, we want to serve our client. And once the digital process started, and I agree with Pak Wimbo, end to end, we have to prepare and accelerate the digitalization process. So we were overwhelmed, but at the end, we did it. Now, we assist our customers by phone and by other channel. And thanks to digital technology, we could do end-to-end assistance. And then, when we talk about digitalization, there are still limitations. Like Mandiri Bank, they have branches all over Indonesia. But we, in life insurance, we have Jakarta branch. So in order to cover and connect with our customers, we have to rely on digital technology. And here, we use every available tool so that our agent could also sell insurance in the digital or mobile. And we also create applications so that incoming inquiries, change of insurance policies or others, it could be done through mobile application. So, and if we want to pay the claim, we could also do that through digital application. And here, we realized that the customer would, they still have concern to meet physically. And we could assist them regarding this. And you're right, we have to go to different segments like millennials and other segments because they are familiar with those high-tech applications. And that's why we have application, because we realize if we want to engage in several applications, even to donate, to make donation, we have digital application available. And if millennial would like to purchase direct insurance, they're also available. We have this in place. So we use hybrid where our agents could cater towards the needs of our consumers. So it's high tech and high touch at the same time. And if the client prefer to meet directly face-to-face with the agent, we could accommodate that as well. And then the service that we provide. There are several customers who say COVID infection rate has lowered. So if we want to buy life insurance or health insurance, do we have to go to insurance? Well, we could cater to that. If they need medical treatment as well, they could do online appointment with a doctor and the medicine could be delivered to their homes. Now here, if we have to do everything online, it would be overwhelming. But we could do that online. And we organize many health seminars and prevention socialization through online platform as well. But we realize that insurance is a long-term aspect. even though there are investment elements such as unit link. And there are 3 limitations concerning the customer, which is that knowledge, the discipline, and the time that they spend to understand their policy. And we prepare robots to assist them. So it's like our customer sit as if they're sitting in a car and let the robot drive them anywhere they please. And for the profit, we have the best profit since we established 13 years ago. So here, there's an increase of 450% in profit. And thank you to all of the stakeholders, our agents, our customer, and all generally staff. They came up with various innovations, they work hard, and they gave the best solution. And then the digital experience I mentioned. This helps tremendously. And we see that there is personalized solution. So we have automation, we have robots. For example, the claim processing. Some of our clients still use the hard copy receipt and others, but we could do all of that online. We could capture the data. So we are trying to do everything online. So like starting from pre-sales. So we could say that generally has applied a digital process end-to-end. And I agree with Pak Wimbo and Pak Fankar and Pak Siddiq. But the upcoming prospect is better. It's very interesting. And hopefully next year, the economy could revive. But when we talk about economy, I think that our customers are already used to this digital platform, even though there are customers who still prefer conventional. So they are offline and online, and we must be able to utilize both processes. And from the survey, it shows that the interest, the awareness level of insurance, there's an increase. So we had a survey covering 20 countries, and 50% think that it is important to have life insurance, especially during COVID times in Europe and also in Asia. So we remain optimistic regarding the prospect of this industry. And thank you so much for your time and attention. Thank you, Pak Edi Tuhirman from Generali. And now we invite Bapak Agung Prabowo, the Managing Director of BNI Security. Now, it was mentioned earlier that our stock market experienced an incredible growth. The number of investors have increased significantly, and foreign investment net buy have reached more than 38 trillion, and IHSG all-time high, more than 6,000, and it breaks the record. So this is enormous achievement. Now we want to know, Pak Agung, how about the prospect of this market next year? So you have 10 minutes, sir. Yes, thank you. So good afternoon to my colleagues here, to Pak Siddiq, Pak Fankar, Pak Edwin, Pak Eddie. And when we want short answer, I still remain optimistic for next year. So that's the short answer. And I will tell you the reasoning. So the prospect will continue, but same as the challenges. And here we use three approach: inflation, fundamental economy, and interest rate. So here in my presentation, when we look at the first page, we talk about inflation first. Here, many people are afraid of inflation because it affects the interest rate, and we talked a lot about interest rate, not only in this session, but in previous session. And if we look at the chart, it is feasible that we have a different story. This is a trend in the US and in Indonesia. In the US, once the COVID-19 pandemic hit, then the retail sales, the production index dropped, and the inflation also dropped. But what we need to be mindful when we bounce back. Now, in the US, the bounce back is different from Indonesia. So the retail demand exceed the production index. Now, this is because many assistance given by the US government to its people, and they have purchasing power, and Pak Wimbo also mentioned that there is a problem regarding supply chain. There's the supply chain disruption, and it is difficult to recover quickly. So there is a gap. And that's why inflation in the US is high. In Indonesia, it's different. The production index in certain industry has developed even more significant than the retail sale. So our inflation could maintain in 1.6%. And some people say it's even too low, according to various sectors, that the inflation rate is too low. And then the people are also afraid with the high price of crude oil. This will affect the inflation in Indonesia as well. Well, my answer, it depends. It depends how our government could see this situation, and if we could make adjustment regarding our fuel prices, then we could see relatively low inflation, because we have a relatively low base. So in summary, inflation remains a global attention, but in Indonesia, the impact is relatively small. Second section, we talk about interest rate. Now, it shows in my slide. Now, if we see the global interest rate, the fear is real. So DFAT already made indication, and it will last longer. So there are a lot of debate, because there are investors who speculate that the interest rate from the Fed could increase if they do not manage it well. And then from the central bank in European Union and Japan, even though they face inflation, but they will continue with their loose policy. But whatever decision they make by the central bank all over the world, what we should be mindful is the real interest rate. So we have a global disconnect. The interest rate is negative. In Indonesia, it's still positive when we talk about real interest rate. And here, like it or not, there will be an increase. And the interest rate nominal will also be at play here. And definitely there are a lot of corporations that will buy the investment grade bonds from the US because we're still in the pandemic, so flight to quality is still there. And there are a lot of investment companies, especially pension funds. They have long-term liability and cash flow that they have to be mindful of. So there will be impact, definitely. But again, if we talk about Indonesia, the real interest rate is positive. And if we see from the market sentiment, how we could handle the pandemic better, it could increase the positive sentiment. And here, we realize that it's not up to the government who could make it successful at the global world, but other corporations like BNI, they have additional platform. And here, this is the first time that EP1 was released by an institution. This is a perpetual bond, and is 40 basis point. Usually it's 30, but here is 40 basis point, and this is enormous. And then global bond, ICBC, $1 billion US. The demand is over 2 billion. So liquidity outside is still there. Demand for paper is still there, even though when we talk about yield, it's still low. But they are very selective. So here, they are choose the high quality ones. And here, there is an increase that the interest rate will go up and there will be impact in the IHSG because there is an increase of cost of capital. So we have to be careful and we must pay attention to which sectors here. And sectors who have gross leverage or debt to equity, we have to be mindful that they will receive extra exposure here. Same with infrastructure sector. Infrastructure is related to the overspending, capex, because they want to improve the infrastructure sector in Indonesia. And other sectors maybe not as favorable when we talk about economic recovery. So the people will not be interested to buy a new stove or refrigerator, but we need to increase this nominal interest rate because this gives incentive to business sector. It gives them incentive to produce, to maintain their production. And then from the next slide, I will make my point that there is always a risk of inflation. But if we see growth, Indonesia compared to other countries, from IPS growth and from net profit margin. Now, you could say that Indonesia is leading in Asia. So this is important. And there are risk factors associated with this, but there are improvements, including in profit. So there is definitely a positive sentiment. And we must anticipate this next year. And when we look at the fundamental basis, why there is a significant challenge is because there is a demand before the pandemic, and there is also other momentums, and we anticipate that the household consumption will continue to grow next year. So Pak Wimbo talked about commodity exports, and this will continue. So if we experience supply chain disruption, I believe this will continue, and it's not easy to find solution. So here we need to anticipate the situation. And then Ibu Sinta Kamdani talk about FDI. I agree, because this is a catalyst to improve the economy and improve the performance of companies. So those are the trigger element for Indonesia's economy. And here we see how it affects the obligation and capital stock. Now, here we have positive performance here. And then the question here, whether the trend will continue. And there is room for this, because there is an improvement in our fundamental, and also the acceleration of the vaccination program. And then Fitch, S&P, Moody's, they still maintain our credit rating. And here it shows that we have good performance. Now, we've been through the financial crisis, so this is more or less the same. So our government bond is still strong. And then the interest rate in Indonesia is still positive. And if there's improvement in the supply chain, then there are positive catalysts that we will see. And then third, the outstanding ratio of government bond towards GDP in Indonesia is still very low. The government bond, the yield has increased. And then there's a lot of investors and foreign investors, but gradually the yield have improved. So this is a positive thing. And then the fourth reasoning, there is a domestic demand, whether it's banking, non-banking, towards government bond. And this is the domestic investor becomes a positive catalyst for the obligation market in Indonesia. Now we could see also the stock market. What I see is the EE ratio. It's expensive. So is it true? Because if we see the absolute thing, EC is close to +1 from the standard deviation from the average EE from past 10 years, but we cannot see this in an absolute manner. Absolute here, PE is relatively cheaper compared to Thailand and Philippines, but it's more expensive compared to Malaysia. Now, does it mean it's better to invest in Malaysia? Not really. At Indonesia, when we talk about growth, for this year is negative, whereas we and the Philippines are still leading from the earning. So if we see PE relatively, then the capital market is not expensive. And then there are the booster for our capital stock. So Pak Edi and Pak Fankar mentioned about the technology or digitalization. Now, what we are seeing now is the ISHG, especially from the technology, we have seen an increase 5-folds. And then Pak Wimbo mentioned there is an increase, but it is supported by the tech unicorn. So they act as the catalyst. So you could see this in the composite index. And then retail participation. If we see from 2015, the retail participate in our stock market. And then in year 2020, 48%. And this year, almost 60%. And this is interesting. Last year, we witnessed outflow, more than 3 billion. But this year, we see inflow, 2.7 billion to our capital market. But the proportion of retail, we see there's an increase by 60%. If we see from the daily transaction at the capital market. So this is a positive thing. It's a positive catalyst. And this is a very positive element for our capital market in Indonesia. There were several people fear the interest rate, and we realize there are risks associated with interest rate, but if our economy is improving and we could have a better fiscal policy and we are more disciplined to increase the vaccination program, then it will expedite the recovery of our economy. I guess that is all from my side, Pak Abdul. So hopefully that answers your question, but short answer, yes, I remain optimistic. Thank you. And one question, IPO have increased significantly. There is a euphoria regarding IPO, and at the end of the year, 55 companies will have IPO. And there are expectations that next year, this euphoria will continue. And you also mentioned about unicorn, the tech unicorn. And we believe that tech unicorn, the startup, will become booster to our economy, especially towards the composite index. How do you see this?
I already mentioned that they will serve as boosters in the Jakarta Composite Index, but now they're still loss makers. But we need to look at them in the way that they build their business using technology. And this is something that in time would be more competitive in their sector. So this is something that I see as something that's positive, not only for the Jakarta Stock Exchange, but also for the economy. We see that there are a lot of examples from China and from the US where they explore new territories using technology, and they are now in the positives in terms of earnings. So this isn't only good for the Jakarta Composite Index, but also for our general economy. So thank you, Pak Agung. Next, we will hear from Pak Edwin Sebayang, advisor to the Indonesian Securities Analysts Association, who is going to tell us basically something what Pak Agus had already said, but maybe he will explore more about which sector is going to recover earlier. Could you display my presentation? So good afternoon, Pak Edi Tuhirman, Pak Fankar, Pak Agung Prabowo, and Pak Siddiq. I hope that everyone's doing well. So when this final presentation is going to be very easy because most of what I'm going to cover has already been talked about by the previous panelists. Next, please. Yeah. So when we talk about, so in 1 week, we will end the year 2021 and we will enter 2022. And in the associations, we have several points that we need to point out, several crucial points. First of all, for fund managers, pension managers, cooperatives, insurance. So what would we be looking at in 2022? We are going to face a lot of challenges, but the most important ones are the game-changing numbers, which is the number of COVID-19 cases. We have 2 experiences in which we had hitherto unforeseen numbers of cases. We have various herbs, and we thought that because we are in the tropics and we have a lot of medicinal herbs, that we won't have those huge number of cases, but that happened. And we never thought that there's going to be a second wave. We know that in July and August, we had a COVID-19 tsunami, and it was quite a blow to the economy, and from which we are now slowly recovering. In a number of European and American countries, where we know they have a great selection of vaccines, but we know here that in Germany, in Austria, in the Netherlands, and the America, they are experiencing a rising number of positive cases. So are we going to follow the same pattern? Because we have already experienced 2 great waves of COVID attacks. So we don't want that to happen to Indonesia. We don't want our V-shaped graph, economic graph, into a bubble shape. And then the next one is free float market cap adjusted. In the short term, the waiting, the share waiting list, and we no longer look at the market value of a share, but how much they are going to free float to the market. So what I want to say in this case is that we have big emittents like Unilever, like Gudang Garam, and they enjoy the free float market. But because of these changes, they are now adjusted. So and they also other fund manager of mutual funds, for example, they have also to adjust themselves to this market cap. And then the incorporation or the listing of tech companies in the Indonesian stock exchange. The technological sector that previously only contribute to 5% to the Indonesian stock exchange, and with the listing of GoTo with the valuation of about 40 billion US, and they will float it, and they will float 50% of their share, and it will come immediately under BCA. So other sectors will also have the value of other sectors will be written down by asset managers. And then companies that used to contribute more to the Indonesian Stock Exchange will contribute less because of these huge tech companies. So they have to reconsider including new economy or technology mutual funds and shares into their portfolio, because these will increase from 5% to 16%, and they have to cut down on other sectors that are impacted by the listing of technology company. Now, how about the taper tantrum, we need to look into how the market will respond to this taper tantrum. When we're talking about the market will adjust a couple of weeks before the tapering. So the impact, we predict the central bank will increase its interest rate in the third or fourth quarter about 25 basis points. So we need to consider not only the fund managers, but also the bond market. They have to sell their long bonds, they're above 10 years. They have to sell these bonds and play in the short-term bonds market, so that when the interest rates increase, they will not fall behind in terms of profit taking. So this is something that fund managers have to look into in various companies. And then we have so far been enjoying a period honeymoon from the increased prices of coal and CPO. These contribute the biggest surplus, the biggest to the state budget surplus. We probably won't enjoy this further in 2022 as the subtropical countries enter the spring and summer, and they don't need so much fuel anymore. So I think there will be a drop in coal prices, and we can look at my projections in the next slide. So for clients, I advise clients to enjoy the profit from coal company shares, and but they don't expect the profit to remain in the next year. So next slide, please. But this probably won't apply so much to the CPO. So this is my prediction for next year. So I think that next year, based on various sources, my prediction is that the economy will grow at around 5%. And inflation, which stands at 1.5%, which is under government forecast, will go up to 2.2%. The low in inflation this year happens because people postpone their consumption, because a lot of people got laid off. They don't have any purchasing power. So there are a lot of uncertainties because people with money put their money in the bank rather than investing it elsewhere or spending it. So now their loan to deposit ratio is very liquid for banks. So because they don't want to risk they don't want to risk lending to non-performing loan, possible non-performing loan. They still have a lot of funds in the banks, but loan growth will grow at next year, on average, will grow by about 5%. Oil lifting will not be too different from this year at 0.7 barrels per minute per day, million barrel per day. Foreign investors have left the Indonesian market in April and May. So they won't convert their rupiah to dollars. So in 2022, I think dollar to rupiah will stand at 1,400 and 300 to 14,300, but they won't reach 14,000 to 900. For coal, I don't think that we would enjoy the kind of prices we see this year. I think even in 2023, there is the trend, the decreasing trend or dropping trend for coal prices to around $90. And for gold, it will stay at this level between 1,700 to $1,775. No. What about highest gains in this for next year? So in December, regardless of the condition, the composite index will rise. So it will probably close around 6,850. But for next year, by calculating the classically by judging at the inflation and GDP, or using other theories of cap valuation, next year the composite index might close around 7,325. So it might grow between 6.8 to 7%. And if the composite index will grow at to 7,300 by the end of the year 2022. So which sectors should we focus on in 2022? So let's take a look at some of the sectors, some of the selected sectors. These following sectors will grow with the assumption of no more COVID waves in Indonesia. Of course, if there is a third wave of COVID cases, this will change, but we assume that COVID numbers will continue to decrease next year. So there are several banks, from classic or conventional banks to the more digitalized modern ones. And then e-commerce, Buka and GoTo. And for telco, because we will continue to be more to conduct more of our affairs online. So these telco companies will continue to rise. So Telkom, XL, ISAT. So, and then automotive with the exemption to the VAT, then the automotive industry will continue to be profitable. And then retail company and poultry. Poultry, I think, will rise next year because more people will start buying from restaurants again. So this sector will continue to rise. And then property, because they have a backlog of around 300,000 every year. But thanks to the government, through their stimulus and various loosening policies, it's now easier to own property. And so So for example, shares of property companies like Sumarekon, BSD, for example, will rise. And the increase in property shares will be followed by the increase in cement company shares. And this also, of course, means that construction company will enjoy a higher share prices. So Wika, ADI, and ETPP. And metal and mining continues to perform well as the government continues to restrict raw material exports from mining companies. So their share prices will continue to be stable. So there's Antam, Timah, and Inco. So these are some sectors that we need to focus. So these sectors are neutral. So coal has reached its highest prices at $190, and then it's going to stabilize. It's going to plateau at around $140 to $90. So ITMG, Adaro, PTB, Harum, they are at also for plantation with the highest prices of CPO now. These are then these agricultural companies will have to be watched. And if we so they're going to be stable, their prices are going to be stable. Now, as we continue to be as we continue to see fewer and fewer COVID cases, and with less people going to the hospital, to the pharmacy, and everything, we don't expect to see that kind of development. These sectors will not enjoy abnormal return or abnormal increase in share prices. So these companies will stay neutral. And the last slide are sectors that will be underweight, those that should be avoided. The first one is consumer staplers. So Indofood, Unilever, Good Food, ICBP, they should be avoided because the 2022 state budget are not focused on consumer. Most of them is focused on social security aid. So they won't bounce back as fast as other industries. And with market cap adjustment to these shares, with the cap adjustment, then fund managers will remove some of these shares, some of these companies from their portfolio. And this also include the tobacco company, and this with like Gudang Garam and others. So this is basically my presentation. Thank you so much. And over to you, Pak Aziz. It's very interesting to see your elaboration, Pak Edwin. Maybe now we are going to listen to some, we're going to go back to Pak Siddiq. So in line with the stock exchange, we want to know whether Bank Mandiri, where would Bank Mandiri focus its efforts next year? Some people say that tourism will grow and hospitality industry will flourish, telecommunication will get a boost. So where would Mandiri focus its credit? So we use a portfolio guideline framework where we analyze the potentials of each industrial sector and its resilience against the pandemic in the past 2 years and its future prospect. So we put the sectors with positive growth in one list and those with less growth in another list. And in our opinion, there are three top sectors that where we would continue to credit from credit lending performance. They will continue to perform well. They will enjoy the benefit of economic recovery, and these are CPO industry, the palm oil industry, because demand will continue to increase, and then telecommunication because of the demand for internet data and streaming services, and construction infrastructure services, especially those related to government policies. And particularly because the government is allocating more funding for infrastructure. Other sectors that might need, that in our opinion needs more time to recover, are sectors that are related to air transportation, and they are, because they are impacted by the pandemic, and they are dependent on the results of the COVID mitigation programs. But if we can continue to keep the COVID-19 impact low and to continue to boost vaccination, public vaccination, so that we can open more access for tourists to the country, then we can probably focus more on these two sectors. So thank you, Pak Siddiq. Okay, I think we have a very interesting discussion so far, but I have many questions from the participants. Most of them ask about they want to ask a lot of things. And many even ask about how certain sectors develop, but most of these questions had been answered the same by Pak Agung and Pak Edwin. But we have several questions from our participants. This is a question from, Alexander Hilarius Fuad, and this is a question from Vankar and Pak Edito Herman. So I think this is a question related to insurance. And he asked, what are the strategy for insurance company for developing, what are the strategy of insurance company in relations to the digitalization and the transparency that is inherent to this, especially in terms of unit link management, where the manager of this unit links also functions as a broker. So I think this is a question for Pak Edwin, I think. But okay, Pak Edi. But okay, so let's let Pak Edi answer this question. Okay. When we're talking about transparency, unit links are very transparent products because it's clear. There is a clear division between the risk premium and the amount that we invest. When we're talking about unit link, I think it's pretty transparent. So I think it's by nature transparent. But again, the challenge in this case is when we're talking about investment, how many people can function like Pak Edwin, who can determine which is the overweight shares and which ones are underweight. Most of our clients usually just buy and hold, or just hold for a long time. They don't change their allocations. So in anticipation to that, we have installed robots, and these robots are, of course, not as sophisticated as Pa Edwin, but perhaps it's adequate for those of us uh, who are not into stock exchange or investment market. And this robot had come up with good results. 90% of our clients who use these robots earn more than the index. So I think this is an example that this robot has solved three issues: the lack of information and the lack of time to manage this fund, and the discipline in managing these funds. Because most of our clients would think that because we sometimes use feeling in making our purchase or when we are selling our shares, then sometimes we make the wrong decisions, and this is something that we can solve by using a robot. Just to change a little bit from the focus, we know that the SME support is being boosted, but is there any strategy for BRI to work on insurance for SME? Because most of SMEs, because a lot of insurance companies going digital at the moment.
Yes, thank you for the question. I would like to add more regarding SME, regarding transparency and openness. General insurance is actually quite simple. Here, meaning if we want to insure our automobile, motorcycle, there are period of time, 3 years roughly, or insurance for 1 year for house, like fire insurance, and usually 5 aspect flexas, and also same for automobile. There are no reasoning not to pay the claim. And then what about the digital penetration in SME? Now, if we do digital penetration, we must bear in mind a couple of things. So when we have digital product, for the first timer, it has to be easy to use, not too complicated, and the volume is not that big. For example, automobile insurance and other types of insurance, micro insurance could be done digitally. Why? Because they could read the instruction, the requirement, and then the result could be converted. And if we use app, the app will calculate automatically the value of the house and everything once we fill out the indicators. And then we also need to look at the segment. The easiest segment is digital saving. For example, if we are dealing with startup, but not all digital saving can be done. And if they know about internet, they are internet savvy, they use smartphone, but not all of them are familiar with digital app. If we want them to use the app, then they are somewhat stuttered. They cannot fully master the digital. So we have to be mindful. And here, it would be good if we have mediator, the third party, and they could cover the conventional customers. So you could do that. So it's simple and they are segmented. That is all. Thank you, Pak Vankar and Pak Edi. And then we go to the next question from Indah Permatasari. If we see the average car, There are still room for banking sector to distribute credit. But how come that the banking still withhold this? They still fear that the economic recovery will not go as planned, or there is a reduced number of credit application. Now, perhaps Pak Agung could answer this question, but start with Pak Siddiq first. Yes, well, regarding the credit growth nationwide has not returned to the period before the pandemic. And it's because lack of demand, starting from the consumption sector, SME, due to various reasons. And maybe because the debtors are heavily infected by COVID. So they cannot expand their business, or they have other obstacles or barriers. Their business is not growing as they hoped due to the pandemic and the social restriction. But we also see that in several sectors, there's an increasing growth. And we could see this in the credit growth. If you think it is better to withhold, then it would be unwise, because bank is in the business of lending. Banks make money by lending money. So here, if we could do this, then it could increase the profit. So banking sector is the most regulated industry. So we must follow the regulation, and we must also uphold prudential banking. So at all times, we must conduct calibration, reward equation, and we must analyze whether the increased risk we accept is worth the profit, and is it measured well. But we remain optimistic that in 6-9 months ahead, if the COVID pandemic could be better controlled and we no longer experience crisis, then we could distribute credit in a more increased manner. Yes, thank you. And Pak Agung mentioned that you are optimistic, then perhaps you could share that. Well, we learned from the previous crisis. And after the crisis, the sector that would recover quicker, and firstly, it would be the banking sector. So we would choose the banking sector first, and we've seen it happen before. How the stock from the banking usually happen in October, and it is significant across the board. So this is indication that there is optimism from improvement of economy. So this optimism supported by other positive effort made by the government, from the fiscal policy, monetary policy, how they are dealing with the crisis, with the pandemic, and how they accelerate the vaccination program. And particularly in October, we see that there is significant foreign inflow, even though it does not cover the outflow, which is 3.5 billion, but at least $2.7 billion inflow, it's a start. There's an improvement. It shows that there is a positive in terms of foreign investment. So here, we see this happening in different countries, and Indonesia experienced crisis back in 1998. And when we experience recovery, the banking sector would revive first. That is all. All right. Thank you so much, Pak Agung Prabowo. So, due to time constraint, yes, we want to add more time, but unfortunately, time does not permit. So we would like to invite Pak Siddiq to give closing statement. Yes, thank you. So I think we are optimistic with the end of the year development, and we want to invite stakeholders to make adjustment from their various business model, their initiative, and adjust with the government regulation so that the business, especially involving the banking sector, could work well. There would be more significant improvement, and this pandemic could be resolved soon so that we don't experience another wave. Yes, and now Pak Vankar. Yes, thank you, Pak Aziz. I think for this economic outlook for next year, one word, optimistic. No matter what, we have to remain optimistic. And from this morning's session, I follow that there is no reason not to be optimistic. And second, in the insurance industry or in general insurance, the next key word is collaboration because we cannot work alone. The community need to stick together. We need to have an ecosystem where various stakeholders could work together. We have to share the risk, share the business, so that together we could move forward and experience a better economy. And then regarding SME, we need to assist SME so that we could contribute towards the economy and it could strengthen our economy at the end. That is all. Thank you. And now, Pak Edi. Thank you. I agree that collaboration is crucial. Changes will take place and we have to make innovation. So it is important. If we fail to do so, it would be difficult. And if we work together, then we could build back better. We could revive. And if we are healthy, then the economy will improve, go back to normal, and we will no longer need face mask. Thank you. And now, Pak Agung. Yes, if we want to revive from the financial sector here, first, we have to focus on digitalization because the impact is not only to capital market, but also towards the economy. And here, we rely heavily on financial market, especially from the foreign one. But here, domestic investor, they are very potential, have high potential. And it could be the backbone of our capital market. And we've seen positive effort from the domestic investors in Thailand and the Philippines capital market. And I'm certain we could do the same. And foreign investor, we need them, but not only in financial market, but foreign direct investment, we need them as well because it's a long-term investment. And it could become the economic factor that support our government. And Pak Edwin? Yes, there are 4 points that I would like to highlight. And it's the game changer, how we could mitigate COVID and the government need to uphold strict health protocol. And then next year, we cannot have the more privilege. So we will have trade deficit once the market price is back to normal. And then in third quarter, then there will be an increased interest rate. So beware that we will no longer experience surplus and beware of the interest rate. And then regarding fund management, sector rotation need to be paid closer attention. And maybe we need to leave CPO, sector, consumer, and health. We need to reconsider. And then we need to shift because we have long-term bond, more than 10 years. We need to turn them into short-term, below 10 years, because there are certain expectations in those sectors. Now, those are the 4 points. Thank you so much, Pa Aziz. Yes, thank you, Pa Edwin. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we agree that next year is the revival period for the financial sector and is in line with the recovery of national economy. So for investors, business sector, no need to worry to invest in our economy. No need to fear to expand your business and to collaborate. And here, we also need to be mindful, if we face another wave of COVID pandemic, then everything will collapse. So therefore, I urge you to still increase the health protocol. That is all from us here. Yes, thank you to all of our research people, speakers. Thank you to Pak Fankar, Bapak Agung, Pak Edi, and Pak Edwin. Thank you so much for your valuable insights. And here we've come to the end of day 1, and we are going in the right direction, in the right track, as mentioned by Pak Siddiq. And this should make us optimistic. I guess that is all from my side. And then we will announce the winner from the best question conveyed to the forum, and they will receive e-wallet in the amount of 350,000. And at the end of our event, you could contact us through this WhatsApp. We will see who would be the winner. And here are the winners for best questions. So we have 5 winners. Each of them will receive e-wallet. And please contact us at this WhatsApp number. And we have a lot of other prizes, actually. And after this, we will also see who win the door prize.